look at what the president has done, he's basically crippled the summit that's expected on Thursday by coming in with a rerun of the same failed bill that couldn't pass the House or Senate.
Since 1981, reconciliation has been used 21 times. The vast majority of those reconciliation efforts have been by Republicans. So we have, nothing's off the table. We'll have to take a look at that. But realistically, they should stop crying about reconciliation as if it's never been done before.
Reconciliation, as we told you earlier in the show, is the parliamentary process by which it's usually used for budgetary measures. You pass something with 51 votes in the Senate as opposed to the 60 usually needed to bust up a filibuster. So we're one day closer to this bipartisan summit. Doesn't sound too bipartisan, but let's bring in our panel. Steve Hayes, senior writer for the Weekly Standard. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor of The Hill, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Steve, what about how this is playing out ahead of this get-together?
Yeah, I have to admit, in all my years of watching Washington, I find this totally perplexing. I do not understand what the White House is doing here. You know, we've seen them make blunders. We've seen them make blunders in particular on health care. But you look at how they are handling this debate in the aftermath of the Scott Brown election when they lost the numbers. People don't want to be talking about health care, and the White House is now talking about health care, and potentially will be talking about health care going forward. It seems to me that they're reading the wrong polls. The White House, the liberals in the White House are telling the president that people like this. And there are polls, if you poll questions individually about individual elements of the various plans, in particular the Senate plan, that poll well because you don't have the costs associated with them. So the president and his advisors, I think, must be buying their own polls, must be believing the best case scenario, the rosiest scenario, in order to keep pushing this. Either that, to take a totally cynical view of it, or it's a total sop to the left. They're going to push for a few weeks to the left, try to make their base happy, and then pivot to jobs and be done with it.
We should point out the Republicans named the people who are going, the senators who are going to the bipartisan summit. They include Senators McConnell, Kyle, McCain, Alexander, Grassley, Inslee, and the two doctors, Republican doctors in the Senate, Senators Coburn and Barrasso. A.B., what do you think the White House is hoping to get out of this summit?
I disagree a bit with Steve. I think it's not perplexing what they're doing. They want one last chance to reframe this debate for health care reform, whether it lives or dies. And in a bipartisan setting, when they have everyone in the room and they're all face to face, they want to show as a party the president bringing the Republicans to the table where the Democrats welcome them and everyone's at the table working together, or they want to show the Republicans saying no. They know that they don't have the numbers in the House in their own party. They don't have the numbers in the Senate in their own party. Health care is further away than we thought it was even weeks ago. It gets more impossible every day. Reconciliation is not possible. They're not going to get a bill. This is a last chance to reframe the debate. And cynically, they are not looking at any polls that make them happy or show a rosy scenario. They're looking at polls that show that they are pregnant with health care. They've voted on it. All the members will take the hit. It's too late to run away from it. Pass something, jam it down the throats, which is the Republican expression for this process, because if you don't, you lose more.
You know, we should point out there isn't a White House bill per se. There are ideas. The Congressional Budget Office can't even score what the White House put out this week yet because they said there aren't specifics. And usually people negotiate over a specific bill that's laid out. There won't be one on the table. Charles.
Right. Well, that's because the event Thursday is not a real event about real numbers. It's a theatrical event. Look, Obama became president of the United States with a theatrical campaign in 2008. Charisma, rhetoric, that's what he does best. He then tried a year of governing. He didn't succeed very well. So he's returning to theater Thursday. And I think it's going to help him. I think he's likely to come out ahead as he did when he met with the House Republicans in Baltimore. And his idea is you pivot off that with the bump you get, the confidence, the morale it infuses in your troops in the Senate and the House, and you go and you attempt reconciliation.
Well, about that, reconciliation, and it's this process. Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia is one of the people who came up with the rule back in 1974. Here's what he wrote to his colleagues just last year about using reconciliation, this process for health care. I oppose using budget reconciliation to pass health care reform and climate change legislation. Such a proposal would violate the intent and spirit of the budget process and do serious injury to the constitutional role of the Senate. That's from April of last year.
Well, since he is one of the inventors of this process, I think he's a pretty good authority on the spirit and intent. And it is a trick, and we've never done it for a bill of this scope and size or reform or revolution in the sixth of the American economy. However, it's not illegal, and I think it's still possible. Look, I think the reason Obama's trying this is not because he wants to placate his left and show that he gave it the college try. This is a man who believes ideologically in this deeply. He sees himself as a world historical figure, not just the first African-American president, but like Reagan, a man who changed history. He wants to be the father of national health care. And if this is passed or jammed or rammed, ultimately we are going to end up with a Canadian system or a British system, and he'll be remembered as the man who did it. It's about ideology and politics.
Steve, as we pointed out at the beginning of the show, the key part of the reconciliation process is the House has to first pass the existing Senate bill with no changes.
Right.
And the numbers just aren't there.
No, the numbers do not work at this point. I mean, you talk to people on Capitol Hill, and you have numbers thrown around anywhere from 215. Somebody today said to me 190 Nancy Pelosi might be able to get. I mean, people don't have any sense of where the final number will be, but there seems to be broad agreement that she doesn't have the numbers. But just to Charles' point briefly, I agree that, I think that he would like to have passed this as a president. But if he were that committed to it all along, why did he take an entire year letting everybody else do the details without this is the first time the president has really weighed in with any kind of specifics, and now we've only got 11 pages worth of specifics at that.
I think the answer is he misread the Clinton experience. He interpreted it as if the president imposes or proposes a plan, it gets torn apart and you fail. And he thought, I'll do it the reverse way, but he overread the lesson. He did it entirely too much, handing it over to the barons in the House and the Senate, and he was stuck with two monstrosities.
Final word, AB. What is the left doing by talking and focusing on reconciliation if, as you say, it really isn't an option? I mean, literally, it is being touted again and again and again on other channels that it's really going to happen.
The pressure from the left is to use reconciliation, and has been for months. The Senate leadership and the White House decided by the end of the fall that it was impossible to use. It is no more feasible today. You have the scare of Scott Brown's victory. You have nervous Democrats in the Senate who face losing their seats. They are going to have to oppose this procedure. They will do it in great numbers.
So you say it's a head fake.
But it's I don't know why they keep talking it up. I just know that the Republicans are not lying when they say they can bring points of order against it, and they can get all of the insurance regulation out of the bill. They can jam all of the important components of health care right out of the piece of legislation, and you're left with nothing.
Yeah, Senator Judd Gregg has 11 pages of objections already. Congress gives Toyota